Hi, my name is Bernard Pucher, and welcome back to the second episode of Make It Short, which is a show where filmmakers can submit their films to us, and we will give them constructive feedback on their work. And joining me today is my co-host Diogo Brigman. Thank you very, very much for putting this show together. I know it's about horror, which is of course your favorite genre, so thank you very much for putting that together. And joining me today is a longtime collaborator of mine, fellow film school student from the London Film School, and we made two movies together, two feature films, and we're constantly sort of talking anyway, right? So thank you very much, Luke Foster, writer and also contributor to our blog. He writes some great articles about horror as well, and has a show about video essays coming up called Alive in the Morning. So that'll be coming soon. But right now, we're going to go to our second episode of Make It Short. Our previous one was about sci-fi. This one is about horror. Diogo, tell us about how you put the show together and what we have coming up.
Yeah, well, so as you said before, horror is my favorite genre. So it was not very hard to find a lot of short films that I fell in love with. Um, uh, in the short films, they have a huge following, right? So we have huge communities of filmmakers and fans of cinema that truly adore the genre, and they have their films on social media, on forums, and then well, the difficult part was to uh, find only four films to show us today here in the episode, but I think I did a good job.
Wicked. So, which one's coming first? What do you have in store for us on the first one?
Perfect. So the first one is called Fever Dream. Fever Dream is a short film submitted to us by its director called Gabriel Viana. This film really freaked me out. It's very simple, it's very short as well, but it tells a very haunting story. Uh, we have a protagonist who is not sure if she's awake or if she's sleeping, and she doubts her sanity. And I think the film does a good job putting the audience on her shoes and doubting our reality as well as we watch it. And it's really, as I said, it's really haunting. And I think this is the best characteristic, the best element of the film.
I agree. I really, really enjoyed that one as well. And Luke, so tell me about your perspective from Fever Dreams. Like, what were the things you noticed, and what did you like about it? And then we'll talk to the filmmakers immediately afterwards.
Yes, well, this film freaked me out as well, quite properly. I got to watch this at 11 in the morning, just in broad daylight, sitting in my living room, and I was pretty creeped out by it. I thought there were some great scenes, some really scary scenes. I thought the visuals were excellent. I really liked particularly the visuals in the dream sequences. I thought were very strong,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
also
yeah.
really liked the visuals in what we thought was the real life as well. Yeah, and really kind of creepy. There was a fantastic jump scare in the dream itself. I thought that was really, really well done, very clever. And then just an amazing scare at the end. I mean, really, that really did properly freak me out. And I was a little bit wary of watching it. Well, I did want to watch it again just to sort of go through it again, and I was a bit wary of having to see that bit
Oh,
again,
that's awesome.
really. But it was, yeah, that really kind of freaked me out.
I mean, considering how long we've known each other, I love it when the film scares you. You know what I mean? Because you're not easily scared. I know you've watched quite a few horror movies, and it is your favorite
Yes,
genre. So
yeah.
to scare you is quite the achievement.
It does. It
Yeah, I
does.
mean, I had
take me away.
when I watched it, I certainly, having made a horror film myself and having been a feature, I of course, when I see something done that well, like, it's just pure director's envy. I was like, oh man, I wish I would have thought of that. I wish I'd done the same thing. So yeah, actually, so let's go straight to the director, shall we? All right, hey Gabe, thanks for joining us. How do I say your last name? Viana?
Viana, Viana, whichever one.
Right.
I honestly don't even know it's Brazilian, so Viana.
Okay, well, maybe we should ask Diogo. Diogo is from Brazil, so
Really?
yeah. So he's our resident contributor.
Yeah, I would say Gabriel Viana, right? That's the right
Yeah,
pronunciation
Viana.
for her name.
If people say Viana, I don't correct them. I recently just got married. My wife's been asking me, what's my last name now? And
And you got
I say
married?
whatever you feel like in the moment. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I think maybe some clarity on that one might be good. But hey, well done. Congratulations on getting married. But even more congratulations now for your film, because you have three of us very, very impressed. So we would like to hear from you what your sort of inspiration was, how you got to making the movie, and if you can drop in there how much the film cost you, like what was the budget was. We'd love to hear that too, because we don't always get that information. So if you're willing, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, to answer the last question first, the budget was pretty much like $30 to $50 total. We just needed to buy fake blood.
Wow.
That was about it. Yeah, we made the liquid latex and everything in house with just whatever we had on hand. But the inspiration for the film was really during the peak of the quarantine for COVID. I hate to say it, but that was really the inspiration. We were locked down. It was myself, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and my sister. And we had nothing to do for several months. And after a while, just playing the same games over and over can get tedious. So we're like, why don't we just make a movie? And they had never done anything like that before. So I had to kind of handle a lot of different roles at the same time. And they were super helpful. My sister did all the makeup that you saw with the monster at the end. It was all just whatever we had on hand. And we we had to cut out the screen for the windows, for the eyes. And a lot of the effects was figured out as we went along. But yeah, COVID was a huge inspiration. And as you can see with the differences between the dreams, how you'll notice that the protagonist is, watching TV, and just like we were watching the news over and over, getting information, it slowly builds into your paranoia, and whatever was outside slowly starts coming inside. And that it's I hate to say it, but the pandemic really, I think, made paranoid out of all of us, really.
Yeah, for sure.
In a little way, yeah.
How long did it take you to put the film together? Like from beginning to end, how long would you say this whole thing took you?
So it was kind of uneven from the inception of the idea to the end of shooting, probably about a week or two. And then editing was like a year and a half. And I think you can kind of tell when you watch it, because everything is kind of, like I said, DIY, it's homemade. And even the idea is pretty much like there's something in your house that's scary, And really what I wanted to play with was the tension that builds in between the scares, and that's why the editing took so long. And it gave me a lot of fresh perspective too, because I would take a month off of editing and then come back and I'd be like, this is absolute rubbish. Like, why would anyone want to watch this? And seeing that helped to bring out all the flaws, and seeing all the flaws, over a long period of time, kind of, I think, gave me a better, more objective point of view, like someone who had never even seen the film or had never even read the script,
Yeah, I mean, getting some distance. I mean, I know we've been developing screenplays, and getting some distance from your work is absolutely essential, just for yourself to get perspective on your work. Absolutely. But do you have a feedback network? Do you have people that you can ask for feedback on your work at all?
I do. It's just I don't really trust people when I ask them for feedback, because everyone's your friend and they don't want to not be your friend. So they're going to say, yeah, it was good, man. It was really scary. But then, after the third time of asking, okay, I get that it was scary. I made it. I know what's good about it. I need to know what you are catching that I'm not. And after a while, it was like, okay, I guess I just have to kind of, do this myself. My wife, though, she was very helpful. Every time I showed her, she's like, that looked weird, or I didn't really feel scared there, or you lost me on that point, or that effect looked really weird. But I think, I think one of the things that, they say is you want it done, cheap, good, or fast. We didn't have much money to make it, and I wanted it to be good. So I had to take a really long time to substitute for all the other stuff. And I think it really shows when you watch the film, because the things that are tightest in the film are the editing. And you can see that the production stuff is all very low budget. It's all intentionally so. We kind of wanted to lean into the micro budget feel of it by shooting on a micro 4/3, and even the darker scenes where you could see a lot of grain, a lot of pixelation in the black, and I think that kind of adds to this homemade feel that you get from the film.
Yeah, I mean, from a filmmaking perspective, what's important is that your choices have intent, and you can tell when somebody either doesn't have the money and then wants to make a bigger movie than they have the money for. But if you know you don't have the budget and you can lean into that and you can make that an intentional aesthetic choice rather than a lack of resources, that's when low budget works the best, especially in a genre like horror where the resources are always at a premium, so you made the mess the best of them with whatever you had. And certainly not having much and having basically your family as crew, I mean, that's it. And did you say you used that's your dog?
Yeah, that was my dog. This is the second film I've done where I've used the Chihuahua as a character, and I think out of all the types of dogs you can choose, the Chihuahua is probably the worst one because they know what they want to do and they know what they're not willing to do. So you got to kind of really try to coerce them. It was a lot of me just like, the one shot where he walks in front of the bathroom, I had to have my wife on the other side, like with a treat. And it had to be a different treat each time because he would get tired of it. So after each take, she would get on the other side, hold it, and I'd let him go. And he'd walk straight towards her. And that was way harder than it should have
been. Would you like to add anything, Luke?
I just have one other sort of question actually, which is, so as we were talking before, I absolutely loved the film. Thought it was very creepy, very scary. If there's one thing that did throw me a little bit, it was just that I thought at the beginning that she was living on her own, and then you suddenly was revealed that there were other people there in the house, and I'm wondering, was that purely a kind of budget thing? And if you'd had a bigger budget and been able to bring in other casts, would you have kind of shown more other people around in a kind of environment, people that we could have been a bit more scared for or worried about maybe towards the end?
Well, so I think with this, and I think with a lot of low budget filmmaking, it's easier to start with what I have or what we have and then work your way to what we can do with what we have. And in this case, what we have really matched with the story we were trying to tell, especially because, like I mentioned, it's very influenced by the pandemic and the idea that even though we live with other people and we're all trying to isolate together and quarantine and wear masks and do the same things, you can't really know what someone else is doing. Someone else may go to the grocery store and briefly just pull their mask down for a quick second, and then you're screwed. So I think it was really important to have see it from the protagonist's point of view. And even though she lives with other people, she's downstairs watching a movie alone. She opens the door for her dog to go out, and just that simple act is enough to bring whatever's outside inside. And seeing it from her point of view and making her feel isolated was really important, especially towards the end when she sees someone outside her door and she calls her brother for help. He shows up and he's like, yeah, I guess you're probably just being paranoid again. And I think that having us, again, see everything from her point of view helped us to really get into that, paranoid and isolated mindset.
Diogo, do you have any more questions?
Well, I think I have two short questions. I think the first one is, have you ever considered a different ending to the story? And then tell us what's next for us, what you're doing right now, what you're working on.
A different ending, I don't think so, because originally it's actually ended up being a lot longer than I thought. And I think I really wanted to end it with a jump scare in a way. Not necessarily jump scare, but something where you would get in the face of the monster and then it kind of just, it consumes the screen in a way. I really I didn't want to show the protagonist getting killed either. I feel like that by then you kind of got the point. But no, I really just wanted to kind of just put an end to it. And I think what we did was exactly what I wanted to do. Because I remember when I read the script for the first time, I had my sister and my girlfriend. They were keep alternating girlfriend or wife. I don't know what to call her. But at the time they were just chilling. And I'm like, hey, I wrote the script. I think we should make it. And I read it to them. And by the end, they were like, why did you have to read it right now? It was like 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, that's how I know it worked. And like, that's how I knew I didn't have to change anything. But as for what I'm doing right now, I'm working on some other things. Nothing I'm really ready to plug, but I do have a podcast called Gator Sauce. It's about my buddy Kurt and I. We just talk crap and drink beers, and it's pretty fun. It's a really fun time. Best enjoyed with alcohol, in my opinion.
Well, dude, well done, man. We really, really enjoyed your film, and congrats on pulling something off with nothing. I mean, it's the kind of filmmaking spirit we absolutely love over here.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I think it's about time that we get a community of filmmakers working together to actually get films done. I think for way too long we've had movies being controlled by people who aren't necessarily interested in telling good stories. And I think that in this day and age, we're just ripe for this kind of thing that you guys are doing. And just like the film that I just did, I think all of this couldn't have existed 10 years ago. And right now is just, we need this kind of thing. We need more low budget filmmaking and more communities of filmmakers working together to get things done.
Dude, that's great to hear, man. I really, really appreciate you saying that. So yeah, we're really appreciating that you sent us your film. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you very much for joining the call.
Thank you very much for having me on.
So that was a great film. And he's such an interesting guy too. Who, like, what a crazy story to. I mean, I know I've heard a lot of filmmakers really getting inspired by the pandemic, but he really seemed to make the most of it. If you had any sort of things that you thought, I mean, you pointed out one thing where you thought, I didn't quite get that there were. If you could nitpick at the movie, because I think that's all we're really doing here, where would you say maybe look for more improvement in the film?
I think that was my only issue. The big issue I had was when even I was watching it again, it did look like she was living on her own. Even at the beginning, because you see her waking up. Like if you're asleep on the sofa and you've got that sort of thing you do when you're on your own, but you wouldn't really have if you've got flatmates or friends or family living with you. You wouldn't really just sort of be asleep on the sofa and wake up without someone else hearing anybody else around. And there's even that little scene where she's kind of on the lavatory with the door wide open.
Right, of course.
And that's something you might. I mean, I live on my own. I always shut the door. But I mean, I don't know. That's maybe something you would do when you were living on your own. That you would do that, but you wouldn't really do that when you got your family around or flatmates around. So that really did give the impression that she lived alone, and then suddenly
there's more people.
Another character suddenly popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah. And, so that was the only thing really for you.
Yes, I think. But it was interesting hearing him talking about the process. I had no idea that it was made for such a low budget, and that he'd cast his sister in the lead role, and so it kind of made a bit more sense then that they couldn't sort of suddenly really introduce kind of more characters.
And it's the pandemic, you can't just bring people in your house either, right?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but it's I have to say, like, this is a great example of a film that really leaned into the aesthetic and made that the core of it, and so because it felt intentional, because it was well done, and then of course, and it was well done, the edit really crafts the film. And I have to say, he mentioned that they sourced actually just for the feed cut off, which is why there are a couple of things that he told us that aren't in the video, but he did mention he sourced all the music from Freeloop, which is a free online library. And so this is all stuff that everybody has access to and is completely free to use. And I think it's amazing how intentional that still felt, that it didn't feel cheap, it didn't feel knockoff or anything like that. He knew what he had and he made that work to the benefit. And I think that's takes a lot of skill, and he really pulled that off, and he scared you.
Yes, and then the score kind of really felt like it had been specially written for the actual short film. I didn't realize that it actually kind of sourced that elsewhere. It really, because it fitted kind of so well. It fitted beautifully with the visuals and with the images and with the scares, I thought.
All right, Diego, what's up next for us? Who are we talking about now?
Okay, so we're going to go to our next horror film, which is called Bad Company. Bad Company is a short film by the director Carlos Omar de León, who has a lot of other short films online. And I decided to talk about this one and bring this one for us to discuss, because it has some elements that I found very interesting and fun to analyze. While I missed a little bit of conflict in the middle of the story, I think it's a short film that has 90s kind of vibe with some makeup and then monsters that they're really frightening. They were frightening to me when I was a kid in the 90s. So I think this is one of those films that we have a lot to talk about, even though the story may be a little bit familiar. But I think that Carlos did a good job in creating this little universe here.
Well, yeah, I really loved the aesthetic of it too. I thought, I mean, it was clearly done with very little money, but they put all their love into the makeup and into the shots and everything. And I actually was really wondering whether they cast an actual pregnant woman or if they, or something like that for the whole movie until the ending revealed that that's not the case. So I'm gonna ask in the interview about that very fact because I genuinely thought she was pregnant. I'm very, very curious how they did that. But I loved the makeup the most. Like the makeup really, really stood out to me. What are your sort of initial thoughts on the film?
I mean, I really enjoyed it. I thought it had a great kind of Rosemary's Baby kind of vibe to it, which I liked a lot. The thing I really liked, actually, before we got to the creatures with the makeup, was the two people from the church who came in, who were really, really creepy. But I love the fact that they created horror and tension just through kind of body movement and body language. It was almost
Looks and glances.
Yeah,
and
it was almost
really
like
good.
a kind of dance performance with the way they were so still. And I don't think we see enough of that. Actually, it actually made me think that that's not something you see an awful lot of, particularly in Western horror. I think kind of Asian horror, they use body movement, like the creepy girl, the ring girl coming out of the TV, and things like The Grudge. They got the people sort of crawling around with very kind of strange kind of body shapes and body movement, but we don't see a lot of that in Western horror. And I really like the way they, the way they kind of used the stillness of the two people from the church. And there's a great bit where, even when I think she went off to the kitchen, and then the two people kind of turned, in unison to sort of look at her. That was really, really creepy.
Exactly.
So I thought it did that really, really well. And I thought the cinematography was really good. I just felt with this one that it was a bit kind of rushed. That was my only thing I really felt. It felt like they'd crammed an awful lot into kind of 5 minutes.
I
and I
agree.
think it could have been either a lot longer, or I don't know whether it was interesting to find out if it's intended as a kind of proof of concept for a feature film.
Yeah, so if I felt it was a trailer, like it really was trying to sell the idea more than it is the story. You know what I mean? That definitely came across. Well, why don't we speak to the director right now, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
And joining us is the director for the film Bad Company, Carlos de León. Thank you very much for joining our show, Make It Short. We just had a nice little brief discussion about Bad Company, and the very first thing that came up is this idea that you had part of sort of a larger sort of universe that you've been developing that's supposed to be a bigger film, or is it supposed to be a more self-contained movie?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, and usually when I make short films, they're always built in as a proof of concept. And like if you see it on my channel, my YouTube channel or Vimeo channel, any of my short films, they're all usually built in, contained. Like just as you can see, they're always left on like cliffhanger, just to want to watch more. I know how hard it is in a short film to world build in 10 minutes or less. Now, for me, just watching short films throughout like my whole career, anything above 10 minutes, I mean, you start losing people. You can even now see it like on YouTube. You can actually see the analytics, like depending on how good the short is or everything. Unless it's like a feature film, people won't stick along with it. So like the shorter, the better usually, and not too short because then it won't make sense unless you're really, you drive home the idea within that set amount of time. But yeah, like as for the Bad Company, I usually this one I was gonna be a new father at the time, and that's where the genesis was the fear of other people coming into your house, like either like home invasion or people coming in and then trying to hurt your family. And what I try to do usually, in my day job is as I work in an ad agency, so I got a like 50-50 mind, and 50% of like business sense and 50% creative. I like to how can I get like something that's on my mind but put it in the genre sense where other people will watch it. So like, hey, I get this this weird feeling about the dangers of being a father. Put it in a genre film, people will watch it. because horror, because horror is like the number one thing, or a thriller or an action. People will watch that and they're like, oh, what is this? It has monsters and demons. So yeah, like in the sense of this is I always had this fascination with cults, and obviously at that time, I was like, I need like a punch in it. So I had demons and stuff like, hey, what happens if it was like in the South? Like it's a big popular thing of like, there's a lot of cults out here in the United States, like a lot. Like you Google them and you throw a stone. Where I'm at here in Minneapolis, there's a cult around here. I'm not going to say his name because I don't know who's involved. I don't want to like get in trouble with them or anything. Get my name in there or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a big cult. I didn't even know there was one here. It's near. I'll just give you this. It's near where Prince's former mansion is. It's around that area. And it's like it's I didn't know they had a couple thousand members or whatever. And then I read into like what they do, and I'm like, ooh. So like I took the genesis of that idea and then threw the genre in, and then my fears of being a father, threw it in there. And like we do have a script for it to be elongated into a feature film. Obviously, it'd be, I still, a business sense of mine, it has to be like 2 locations. It just shows you where he went and then where it's at, and it's like more of an assault movie, or like more of the cult members get invited in there, and it's just the mother trying to survive.
Right, I love that. I mean, you pretty much had some thoughts on the. I mean, my favorite thing about the thing was the makeup. I thought you did a really really stellar job on that, and I think what resonated with all of us was the aesthetic of it. You know what I mean? It really sort of tried to be nostalgic. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that, ideas on that?
Well, I actually wanted to ask about the sort of like the choreography almost, really. I mean, particularly of the two people from the church, because what I loved the most about it was their kind of stillness and their body movements. And we were talking about before you came on about how unusual that was certainly in a Western horror film, to be able to using kind of body movement in order to kind of create kind of tension and scares. And did you work very closely with those 2 actors to sort of choreograph their movements and get them to be kind of as still as they are?
Yes, Tara and the other actor, we both had what I told them to watch would be like a lot of like I wouldn't just say cult movies or anything, but I would say like, hey, watch a lot of European movies, and how like what I liked about like the influence about European movies, like like movies from like Denmark or Sweden, they all have like that sense of like, when you're building a character, you got to build a background with them, and then why did they become the way they are? If they're possessed, or is that we get a sense is that the demon that's possessing them, and they're just using the body as a vessel, or is that just who they are, and then they let the demon in at that certain point when they need to act out? So yeah, when I was talking about them about the script, we thought less is more. The sense of like, now when you meet people, like in the sense of like, meeting new people in real life, you're like, what creeps people out most? Like, it's people that are out and about and just like, oh, hey, how we doing? And everybody knows that. And you can go to a bar, you'll see people like acting out, being like, oh, ha, ha, yeah, jolly good time. But then what scares me people the most is the quiet people. I mean, the awkward people that just don't react to you. And then there's kind of always in that sense of like, that lizard brain of ours that like, this doesn't seem right, because that's not how humans act. Humans don't act in that like very, very like bland tone, monotone thing, unless it's like something's wrong with that person, or like, unless there's like something behind that, and then it starts making your mind run around thinking, is this person a serial killer? Are they profiling me? Who is this person? It just fills your head with a bunch of stuff that you don't know of. It's basically a sense of unknown. You throwing all your stuff into that character, into those villains, kind of like Jaws. You never see it, but your mind amplifies how big it is. And then if you can do that with the characters that are fleshed out like that, then I just think it just amplifies the horror in it.
I have a question. Was your leading actress pregnant at the time when you were filming that, and then you filmed her non-pregnant stuff later, or was that a costume? Because it was really effective.
I got to give a shout out to my really good friend Ryan Shadowing. He's done feature film work. He's actually based here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He's done for big feature films for like I'm Not a Serial Killer, that had Christopher Lloyd in it, and he he was the main VFX supervisor for Wrong Turn, the remake that just came out recently, and he was the one that provided with all of that stuff. He actually had the gag is that he had the mold already for another actress, the similar build, and it was for like a monster coming out of its stomach. So he just made another cast, made it a little bit more fit to her, but made it round, so just to make it like that. And then and she was pregnant before. She had a child before the movie, so she knew how to act. She only had, I think her child was only like 1 year old, so she knew. So and I told her about that. She's like, "Oh, that's perfect. It's like reflex memory, so I know how to act and walk around like a person that already has a baby." The funny thing is, she got pregnant that same year after we made the movie. So like for her, it's like she was pregnant, and now not pregnant in the movie, and then she got pregnant in real life. Oh, but yeah, I guess that's what she liked about it too. It's like, hey, like that happening to my kid, or like her with that one scene that everybody talks about with her falling down. It just amplifies the horror in it because he's like, oh my gosh, everybody knows when you see a pregnant person, you don't want nothing bad happen to them, but when you see something bad happen to them, you're like, it just amplifies the horror of like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next?
Because I thought it was really ambitious to basically let a pregnant woman do stunts like running down the stairs, and I was like, "Well, I hope she wasn't really pregnant." Jesus, like that. Like that to me was scarier than the thing later when there's the threat of the stab. Because I was still shocked from her running down the stairs with a big belly. I was like, "Oh, Jesus!" You had me with that one properly. Diogo, do you have any questions for Carlos?
Yes, I do. I do. When we were discussing your participation here on the show, I remember that the first of your films that I watched was Invoke, which is also very well done and a good film. But when I watched Bad Company, then I changed my mind. Like, of course, I still think that Invoke is very good, but Bad Company had some elements that really spoke to me, and I think that the makeup, it's one of we already discussed here. We already talked about how much we liked it, but I wanted to know more about the inspirations because for me, it felt like early '90s horror that I watched when I was a kid and it really creeped me out. So I would like to know from you what was the inspiration to create those faces.
Great question. For me, I like one of my this will probably like reveal the curtain from like the Wizard of Oz thing for everybody there. One of my favorite movies of all time, if not my number one movie. I don't know if you can see a poster up there. It's the Lost Boys.
Lost Boys,
Oh
of
yeah.
course.
So obviously Kiefer Sutherland, and when they finally vamp out in the middle of the movie, that creeped me out. I mean, I was only like 5 or 6 years old when that movie came out, and my brothers and sisters would rent that from the video store. But my sister worked at a video store. She would bring horror movies all the time, and then when I got old enough, I could start going to there, and she'd let me rent movies. But that movie was like it was that movie in Nightmare on Elm Street, especially part two because how Cat looked and Robert Englund looked at that one. That one he looked out of all like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, the more like evil looking the eyes. When people look at somebody that's menacing, what's more menacing other than a person's eyes and how they're arched or like how you can see how sharp their features are.
Yeah.
It's just like you amplify that by like 100 or 1,000. That just creeps people out, and then you change somebody's eyes, and like the eyes are the window of the person's soul. You take those and you modify those to things that aren't like exactly what true to life, but then try to make it kind of true to life to be like you live in that little uncanny valley of is it real, is it not? And those are my inspirations, like from like the Lost Boys or like 30 Days of Night. Basically creatures that may exist, that could exist, they exist in our minds, but they're also like drawn in interpretations because on the behind the scenes of the Lost Boys, I have actually the book. I have it's a limited edition book, and I think they only had like 10,000 of them. I think it's called Beyond the Boardwalk or something like that. I just got it last. It's from the UK, if you can believe that. I got this book. It has all the behind the scenes, and it shows you all the stuff from the concept drawings, how they really were gonna actually go like Fright Night, like really vamped out and really like over the top. But then I think one of the VFX artists was like, no, let's try to like tone it down. Or Joel Schumacher was talking, let's tone it down and keep the essence of like he was saying, oh, let's keep them they're still handsome and sexy looking, but just amplify that and just make it sharper and it gives you that creepiness of like, yeah, they're still attractive, but this is vicious and it's scary looking. And that's what I wanted for our film, is like, I wanted to go back to that, like, when you look at those creatures, like, they creep you the hell out, because when you see them, like, your mind still thinks that's kind of real because it's actually there. It's not CGI. It's actually on their faces. And, using lighting tricks and makeup effects to blend it in to make it look real. Especially like when the stab in the head and then the blood coming out.
That was
Those are
awesome.
all old school, reverse angle. The knife wasn't even in her head. It was like we used the angle to make it look like it pulled out, and then have Ryan push the blood out. It's all stuff from the 80s that I was influenced from. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that was
Perfectly.
awesome. Yeah, no, I love that. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show for us, and we are looking forward to watching more of your work. Really excited for it.
All right, thank you guys, everybody.
So that was really cool. Like, I have to say, like, the first time I watched it, I got to watch it twice, and I was really so at first I thought, oh well, this is just a trailer. You know what I mean? It's a bit more padded out than a trailer would be, but this is just a trailer. But the second time around, you really get to see much more of the nuances and the ideas that he was trying to put in. Clearly, of course, couldn't have a big stunt crew or anything like that to do the fall or anything like that. Something you'd have in a feature that you wouldn't necessarily get to have in a trailer. But I thought the filmmaking was just really on point, and did everything. What would you guess would the budget be? I forgot to ask him, but like, it looked proper, right?
I think, yeah, it looked very good. I mean, I think I was going to say one of the things I liked the most about this was the cinematography. I think was extremely good, and I think an issue actually with some of the other shorts that we're talking about today were that I felt they were a little. I don't know how you felt about that, but I felt some of them were a bit too dark at times.
Yeah.
And I think it's always tricky with a horror film. You don't want to.
No, I've run into that problem as well.
You don't want everything to be too brightly lit, because then it's not scary.
Mm-hmm.
But then if it's too dark, then you can't see anything, and I did find that as a little bit of an issue in a couple of the other shorts.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, I thought, particularly in that middle scene with the attack, he got the band. It was really, really well shot, because it was dark, but you could still see
everything.
But you weren't sort of trying to peer through the gloom to try and figure out what was going on, and you could really see everything really well. So, yeah, I think the cinematography definitely gave it some very kind of high production value. Budget-wise, I don't know. I mean,
it could be anything, right? I mean, if they were smart, they could have spent very, very little on it. The one thing they definitely spent money on is the makeup effects. You know what I mean? They were definitely very smart on that. But he seemed to have a proper cinematographer, so unless he did really well with the favors, he probably had a fairly healthy budget on this one. But even if not, well done. So Diogo, what's our next one?
Good. So our next one is called Someone There, which is a very simple and concise short film. It feels like a one-man show because it's directed by Maalik Evans, who it's also the protagonist of the film. We have a secondary character, but it feels like he did most of the work there. And although it's very amateurish to some point, we can see that there's a lot of potential there. I chose this one because, of course, Maalik sent it to us, and when I watched it at first, I felt that was those kind of movies that reflect talent, even if we can see it's not very sophisticated yet. It needs to be more polished. It needs maybe more time. But for a short film with this, with the theme that it was talking about, which is not very different from Fever Dream that we discussed earlier, but I think that here we have something a little bit more. We have a beginner behind the camera. I might be wrong, but that's the impression that it gave to me. But still, I think it's interesting for us to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as clearly an actor trying to sort of direct themselves, which is not an easy thing to do, but I mean, I guess for actors, it's not uncommon to just be aware of their movements and stuff like that. I found out afterwards that the actor was the director as well. So for me, this was a surprise. I thought this had like a proper auteur behind it and everything, and it wasn't just sort of this. I mean, I don't think it was a one-man show. I mean, because some of the camera moves are really well motivated, and so this was clearly not just somebody who had never operated before. Like we on our last episode, we had somebody who in a film that clearly had made a film for the first time and didn't quite know cinematic language or anything, or at least didn't know how to execute it well enough. Whereas this felt reasonably competent on the execution and stuff like that. I think, and I really liked the performances in it. I thought it all felt very natural, you know, which is not an easy thing to do. These kinds of encounters can feel very unnatural when the actor isn't quite, you know, up for it, or the writing isn't quite up for it. And didn't have any issues on that front, like performance-wise, and the interaction between the other them and the other character was perfectly fine and quite entertaining. You know, it was a nice little sort of comedic foil in the middle of it, you know, which was very good. I think it's writing-wise for me, the story was the biggest problem. I didn't quite get what the story was, you know. I mean, I get what the story is, but like I didn't know why I was watching this story, and it felt like there was a whole lot of emphasis on tension that never really paid off for anything. And so I think that's really where the film struggles the most, and it struggles because it's also long. You know, it's not a really long film, but because there's so little story, it felt very long, and it could have been edited probably much tighter than it really was. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The performances were definitely the strongest element. I thought, I mean, the friend who came in was terrific, and she was brilliant. She was almost so good, you kind of wanted more of her. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to find out later whether it's just one of those where you kind of, after the fact, when you see how good the actor was, you think, oh, I should have actually had that character feature much more heavily. But yeah, I completely agree that I think there's a really good build-up of tension and suspense, and I really like some of the kind of point of view shots where you see that there's obviously some kind of entity or something kind of spying on this character. I think that's all done really well. But it kind of like the tension builds up and up and up, and then it just suddenly just ends very suddenly and very abruptly. And I think the biggest thing that was just missing for me was just that big scare at the end. Kind of like as with like the Fever Dream short film we were discussing, it's got that big creepy scare.
Proper payoff.
You'd almost take that shot out of that film, but put it in this film, and it would have at least paid off. You know, like what it was building up to. It felt a bit, you know, it's almost like a joke without a punchline. You were kind of building up this anticipation and expectation in the audience that this big scary thing was coming, and then never quite delivering it. And I think that was what, you know, was just missing the most for me.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, why don't we hear from the director? All right, Maalik. Thanks very much for joining us. We just had a lovely little chat about your film, and I have to say, we all sort of came to this conclusion that our favorite part were the performances in it. Like it all felt very natural, and the interaction felt really natural. And because you sort of directed yourself in a way, is acting your background? Is that basically, did you sort of create this character for you to play? Is that sort of what happened here?
Well, thank you for saying the performances were good. I felt like I did terrible, but everybody else was fine. But yes, I come from a background of acting, but I gave it up actually a year ago because I realized I wasn't invested in it anymore. And I just felt like I was on a journey of doing something that no longer served me anymore. It was something that I was interested in as a kid. And then I realized, like, just because I wanted to do it as a kid doesn't mean I have to stick to it forever. And I realized, like, my heart and soul was in screenwriting. So I was like, I really didn't even want me to be in the film. I honestly wanted someone else, but I know that comes with money. And I was like, I'll just use myself.
So how did you go about directing yourself in this case? What was sort of your process in figuring that one out?
I mean, just the basics of acting, like what's happening, what's motivating you. I don't really know how to explain it. It's such an accurate thing to get into the mentality of, like.
Well, talk about how you worked with your camera operator, with your cinematographer.
So I was my own cinematographer. I basically used my friends as the camera operators, and I just told them what I wanted exactly. And sometimes we would practice the shots, and then after like one or two tries of it, they were like, oh, okay, I know what you need or what you want. And we would just run through it. It was actually really simple. My friends are pretty easy with the camera. Mind you, we used an iPhone. And then I had like a gimbal. So steadied the camera. But yeah, it was a simple process.
Nice. No, that was going to be my next question, what you filmed on, because iPhones nowadays are really good. You know what I mean? So you can do quite a bit with very little. So that was going to be my next question. So how long did it take you to come up with the project, and how long did it take you to complete it?
When I conceived the idea, I had basically just moved into my apartment in LA. I don't live in LA anymore. I live in New York now. But when I had moved into my apartment in LA, December of 2020, I wanted to create a home invasion film because those are my favorite subgenre of horror and thrillers, like Scream, Halloween, Hush, all those kind of films. And because I'm familiar with being a victim of a home invasion, I was like, oh, well, this is a familiar territory. Um, so let's create, like, I wanted to put an idea that was in my head on paper, but in a short form. So I just wrote it in a couple days, revised it, and then filmed it. It took us like 4 days to film. And then I sent it to this editor in the UK, actually. He worked on Sharp Objects. His name is Michael Zach. I was a big fan of like his featurette on HBO, so I reached out to him and he said I'll do it. And
Nice.
yeah, he did a lot of great things editing wise, so I give a big shout out to him. So yeah.
Diogo, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. First, I have some comments because I don't know if you remember, you sent your short to us, and I think the next day we answered already. But it was very quick. It was very. When I watched your film, I think I was the first person to watch it, and what really draw my attention to it is that to me it looked like, and as you've been saying, that you did most of the work, right? You acted, you directed, you helped your friends how to use the camera, and those, yeah. But the end result was pretty good, for just one person with little budget. So
Thank you.
congratulations to that. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like I just want to say again, I feel really honored to be here. Like the fact that like I sent it and then I got such a quick response, I was just thrown back. I was like, oh, they actually liked it.
Good. Yeah, we did, and you should be proud. You should be proud because we can see the talent there. I have a question about supporting character, which is your friend who comes up and then looks around, and then is she another actor that you already knew before, or like how's her experience with acting, or did you have some help casting someone?
Yeah, she her name's Angelica. She we're not friends anymore, unfortunately, but at the time we had known each other for a while, and I met her through some mutual friends. And she comes from a comedian background.
Okay.
So I had just asked her because I knew she was getting into acting. I was like, hey, do you want to do this short film? And she was like, yeah, sure. And we both are fan of horror, and she did it, and she was so graceful, and like I felt like she was seamless on camera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I was happy with her performance. So I think she's gonna do big things.
Yeah. Luke, you had made some observations about the screenplay earlier, where we were wondering what your intent was to build suspense. Do you want to?
Yeah. So firstly, yeah, congratulations on the film. I think you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
On the movie, and I think what was really good about it was the build up. I thought was the build up of tension and suspense. I really like those kind of shots where you thought there was someone spying on your character, and it felt, certainly to me watching it, like it was really building up to a kind of a very scary kind of climax. There's a lot of, you were sort of getting that sense of anticipation and expectation that a big scare was coming. Then to be honest, that big scare didn't quite come, I don't think, for me anyway. And so I was sort of wondering, was that your intention when you were writing it? Did you want the ending to be a bit more kind of ambiguous rather than going for the big jump scare at the end? Or do you think now, having sort of seen the finished film, would it have been more effective to have had that kind of, like that big final kind of scary moment at the end?
The way I wrote it, how he basically gets a message on his computer, and then when he calls his friend, and then it turns out the man finally reveals himself, and at that point it's already too late because he's right there with the knife. That I always intended on doing it that way. So I don't know if it landed well, but that was the intent. Um, so yeah, I always planned it that way.
Yeah, but it's interesting because sometimes it's we're trying to figure out what the intention was versus what you can do with the limited resources that you have. And we've come across a few times where filmmakers wanted to do a certain kind of thing but simply couldn't do it, and then they tried their hardest to try pull it off another way. And we were wondering what your intent was, because sometimes that's makes it very revealing about how the choices play out. So I would like to know more about your home invasion thing that you were talking about earlier, because that's clearly sort of a bit of an inspiration. How did you take your experience and apply that to this in the writing process of it?
So when I was 10, me and my family were stalked by a woman that essentially my father had killed her son, but it was in self-defense, and she kind of lost it, kind of like Pamela Voorhees.
All right.
And yeah, she found our address in a newspaper. At the time, the Washington Post had published it, and from there, she tried to break into our home and she attacked our neighbor. So it was a very it was it's always, how do I say this? It's always been easy for me to tap into that memory, just because it's traumatic, I think, for anybody, but especially like a 10-year-old. So I just took inspiration from that, and I didn't want to redo what's already been done. Like Scream's been done, Halloween's been done, a number of films with home invasions have been done, The Strangers, and those were my inspirations, but I did it in my own way that I think is different. Like the fact that he reveals himself while messing with the character, but the character's so oblivious that the man's in the house, where usually the killer makes it pretty known that they're there and you just have to figure out how to get out. This person is really like, oh, lost, like, oh, I really didn't know that you were here, and now that you're here, I'm basically dead.
If you could change something about your movie, if you wish you could add something or remove something, now that you have hindsight, and now that you've finished it, because I certainly have never been happy with my films after I'm done. Like I've spent all this time and then I'm like, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that. If you could, is there something that you can see about your film where you go, oh man, I wish I'd done this, acting wise or editing wise or anything like that?
I guess part of the ending that I wish I would have done, because I'm a big fan of like chase scenes and like that whole slasher feel. I think I now that I look back on it, I wish I would have taken advantage of that, but I guess limited resources. So I didn't know how I was going to execute that, even though I had the idea originally in my head. The way it ends is the way I wanted it to. But then as we were making it, I was like, oh, well, I'm a big fan of chase scenes. Maybe there could be like some face off. And that's one thing that I wish I would have did differently, but it is what it is.
What it is. Yeah. Well, hey, thank you very much for coming on the call, and thank you for coming on the show and showing us your movie.
Thank you. I appreciate you all watching it and liking it.
All right, thanks very much, man. I will catch you later, and thanks again. And feel free to send us another film if you make one. We definitely want to.
I definitely have some stuff in the works, but I'll reach back out.
All right, awesome. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, that was a great chat with Maalik. He gave us a nice insight. Also, I always find sort of one-man band shoots really interesting. As we had two today, actually, that were a bit one-man bandish. I mean, Gabe, he was definitely, he had a bit of help with his family and no help from the dog apparently. But it's interesting to see just how sort of ambitious these filmmakers are, and that they're just taking what is around them to try and tell a story. And I think he is, what's really interesting is just how he coaxed his friends who aren't filmmakers into being operators for him. and I thought it looked really good. Like I was, certainly looked better than my films that I made back in whenever, so I thought it was really cool. I think from hearing from him about this story, I feel like what what he maybe seemed to struggle with is how to get his ideas down onto film, like down into the camera, because you mentioned earlier that some of the films were too dark. This film is definitely one.
I was going to say this is definitely one of the ones.
This is definitely one of the ones that struggled. But he had no cinematographer. He basically shot with whatever he had. No lights, no camera, well, he had the camera with the iPhone, but that's about it. So I've definitely run into that problem myself, where the item of desire, the thing that's important, is as dark as the rest of the scene, and that's actually the thing you should be paying attention to. And so he definitely ran into that a few times. Is there anything else that sort of stuck out to you, sort of in this film, that he maybe missed or maybe could have worked on more?
I think one thing I actually was going to mention about one of the really good things about Fever Dream, I thought, was that the main character reacted very appropriately to the creepy things that were happening around her.
Yeah.
There was a kind of very appropriate level of when there was something creepy going on, but she just didn't really, she missed it, or she just sort of brushed it off. And then when things got properly scary, then she was properly scared. It felt very realistic and true to life. And I think in comparison, I felt with this film, the main character got a bit too freaked out too quickly. There was just this one moment where there was a door kind of slamming, and suddenly he was a bit freaked out and grabbing a weapon and grabbing a knife. And I think that could have just been developed a little bit more. Because, when you're at home, okay, you can be a bit creeped out if there's a door banging, but you're not going to immediately, it can be the wind, it can be something else.
Yeah.
You're not going to go quite so extreme so quickly. And I think it could have just built up that tension a little bit more, and having maybe had a few more creepy things happening, so that the main character just sort of escalated a little bit more.
Or at least motivate the escalation. So if this is a genuinely sort of paranoid character, that behavior is at least more motivated and set up, and that, so this is the kind of person that has 5 deadbolts on the door, and that kind of thing.
Exactly,
so clearly a more paranoid. So if you're going to have that behavior, you have to set it up. You have to motivate it. But that's not what this film was. This film was sort of a deliberately slow, intent was slow build. And I agree with you that the performance was definitely maybe a bit too exaggerated too early. It felt more appropriate at other times than it did in the very beginning. I would agree with that. As I respect that he gave it a shot like that. You know what I mean? Like he definitely took the initiative and made a movie and wrangled his friends to make it with him, and that's the first step. So if you want to make movies, this is where you start. And so the excuse, I need a camera, I need this. No, you don't. This guy made it with his phone, and he wrangled his friends. You know what I mean? And while it's not the best movie ever, the performances are solid. It looks all right for having no lights. It was cut well. So seriously, you can make a movie with very, very limited resources, and Fever Dream showed the same thing. So yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Let's go. Okay, so the last horror film that we're going to talk about today is called Let Them Eat, which is a twisted horror film directed by LaShaunte Wade. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Well, it's a horror movie that brings some family drama, some romance, and some revenge. It's like almost a revenge movie. And we have this interesting perspective of a woman who is certainly very, twisted in some way. We get some of her background in the middle of the story. We could have seen a little bit more from that, where those crazy powers and eyes came from. But anyway, we dive into this relationship of a woman with her husband, and then another woman. And then what happens here, and what called my attention, is that mainly the last act of this short, it's really, really crazy. And I always love when filmmakers, they just don't care. They do what they feel like, and this ending was certainly something that's not the most maybe family friendly kind of movie, but I think it requires a lot of courage, and LaShaunte was really very brave in doing this film.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually want to hear what you think about this one because I we had a very very brief discussion, but I'd really like to hear what you think about the overall story and the concept of this film.
I liked the main character a lot. I thought it had a very compelling central lead character. This woman whose husband seems to be kind of cheating on this girl from his office. And there's, as you were saying, Diogo, she seems to be, maybe there's some kind of supernatural, creepy element going on there. Has she been overtaken by a demon? You're not quite kind of sure, but I thought that was very intriguing. And a very good performance actually by the lead actor. I thought she was quite compelling on screen. Really kind of drew your eye and your attention. I think my issue with this really was the pacing. I mean, this film was roughly around 3 times as long as any of the other short films that we looked at today. All the others were around 5-6 minutes, which seems to be about the kind of length that most horror shorts certainly kind of are.
And the ones that are effective, actually.
Yeah, and 15 minutes is, I think, pretty quite long for a short film. And if you're going to have a 15-minute short film, you've really got to kind of warrant having that kind of length and asking an audience to watch the film for quite some time for a kind of a short. You've got to have the storyline to back that up, and I felt with this that there wasn't really enough of a story there for kind of 15 minutes. I think I felt that either you could have cut the whole thing down quite considerably and made it a kind of 5 or 6 minutes short, like the other kind of films that we've been looking at, or you could have used the kind of the time a lot more effectively and efficiently, and told a much bigger story. Maybe explained a lot more what was happening with this lead character. There were some references to something maybe going on in the basement. They were talking about after she'd killed the girl, they were talking about taking the body down to the basement, and that made it seem like they kind of sacrificing something for a kind of demon. There was definitely more to be explored there, I thought, if you were going to kind of use up use up the screen time. Whereas as it was, I just felt there was a lot of, I guess, what you might call shoe leather sometimes in movies, where there's just people kind of doing things you would do in real life, but you don't really need to see them do it on screen. Particularly kind of early, you had these 2 people come in, and then this woman was cooking dinner, but they were talking about the dinner she cooked, and then you sort of saw them kind of going, and then she said, oh well, let's go and eat, and then they would all walk around to the table, and you'd see them sitting down, and then she was going off again to get the food, and then she was bringing them their meals, and then she was sitting down again, and I think that the husband said, let's eat twice, which you didn't really need to do, and then you sort of see them eating for a while, and I think all of that, it's really, you don't really need any of that, and I think she could have just cut into the action a lot kind of quicker. And similarly towards the end, after she'd kind of killed her husband and this girl, and she was then eating them, there's a lot of repetition, I thought, in terms of the moments and the beats, and it was kind of like that throughout. There was just a lot of where we're just seeing things and hearing things that we'd already kind of seen before.
Right.
And it's interesting, Diogo, you were talking about having that kind of crazy ending, and I do really like those kind of movies, particularly I think in feature films there's almost a specific, I don't know anyone's ever given a name for it, but there's almost a specific subgenre of horror films where you kind of have a film where there's just some sort of tension and something slightly creepy going on for most of the film, and then the whole thing just goes absolutely ballistic and bonkers at the end. Films like kind of Society does that brilliantly. Audition is kind of like that as well.
Well, Saint Maud did that, like recently.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, where there's just a kind of, you sort of maintain a kind of creepy atmosphere, and then it just goes bonkers. And I don't, maybe that's what the intention was here, but I just felt there wasn't enough kind of that creeping kind of sense of tension and suspense, and enough to kind of keep you gripped onto the screen. Before it then, if it then was going to go a bit kind of crazy at the end.
I mean, the emphasis on food at least seems that, I mean, she's a chef by trade, and so maybe, you just you want to show off the food and the eating and that kind of thing. So it's just, I get that. Like I've known quite a few sort of production designers that want to get into directing or that have gotten into directing. And they love the work that they've done and they love the work that they see, and so they spend time in the edit showing that off. Like I remember many years ago, I was part of a shoot where the guy was a props master for World War II film, and so he had all these World War II props, and so he made this short about World War II soldiers in a forest, and he showed us how the whole machine gun is being put together. Like there's a whole action scene, they have to kill somebody. But instead of getting to the point where they're set up and then they shoot, he shows us how the whole thing is being put together and how long it takes. Now, that's not what we want to see. We want to see the story unfold. We don't want to, as much as we love the production design, we're not there to love the production design. We're there to love the story and the characters. And I think some people can get caught up in that. I know I got caught up in, like, I have a big love for electronic music and DJing and that kind of thing, and so I have a tendency to emphasize musical moments or these kinds of things longer because I love them, but the story needs to move, and so therefore just because I love it doesn't mean it should stay, so maybe in this case that's what happened. The personal passion for food and for dining and that kind of thing simply got the better of the edit in a way.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite likely that something like that happened, and I think she could have just used that sort of that time and that space to kind of establish the characters a little bit more, because I did find it a bit confusing as well at the beginning, because it started with this lady cooking, and then you saw what you thought was a couple arriving, and I really felt that these two people were together. I thought they were a couple visiting this house to kind of have dinner with this woman, rather than it was the husband coming back home and he brought someone from work with him, but that was never really kind of explained, like why she was there. Had she come round for dinner? I think I think they almost had a very similar setup in Bad Company, actually, where you had the woman cooking at the beginning, and then the husband came back with kind of two guests for dinner. But I thought they did a really good job in that of establishing that these two are, even though he came back with the guests, they did a very good job of establishing that he was the husband and he was coming home and he'd brought these people with her.
It was very
with
clear.
him, sorry. Whereas I think with this, it was a very unclear kind of what was happening, and I was certainly a bit confused watching it. And I think if you're going to have a husband cheating on a wife, you've got to establish their relationship a bit more so we can kind of care about it. Whereas we didn't really know that they were husband and wife before we sort of found out about the cheating and the fact that they were actually husband and wife at the same time, which made it a bit difficult to kind of emotionally react to it.
Right, of course. Diogo, do you have any more thoughts?
Yes, I do agree with you. I agree with what Luke just said. I think we could have had some more setup to the story. I also understand why it dragged a little bit, why it was, I think the focus was on the event, on the dinner, but I think it could have used some more conflict. I think the awkwardness of having a dinner with your husband and the woman that he's cheating you on could have been more well addressed, could have been more taken advantage of, because it's such an awkward situation, right? And then we go straight to the revelation that she already knows about it, and I think it could have been maybe a little bit more well developed into the narrative, and then it could still have had the same duration at the end, because then the time of the dinner would I don't know, would have more story to tell during that time.
I agree. I think the most important thing though is that this is somebody who doesn't do filmmaking for a living, right? So this is somebody who does this on the side, does it for a passion, and probably because they don't get to do it all the time, there are things that they don't necessarily haven't had the experience to sort of not do better yet. You know what I mean? And certainly, I remember my early short films were all every scene was just that little bit too long, or sometimes you just leave a scene too early, you know, and you keep things that should really just go. And, you know, and in hindsight, you know, after you've done it, you go, if I'd done this, if I'd done that, you know, maybe this could be tighter or work better, you know. And I'm always wary of a filmmaker who's super satisfied with their work, because that means they haven't thought about it hard enough, you know what I mean? As much as I love the work I've done, I have plenty to criticize for it. So I respect her highly for doing this separately, you know, to a regular career. And it's not even a tangent career, because with Carlos, he works as an ad exec, you know what I mean? So, you know, for him, this is a tangential career, you know, but she's a chef, you know, and the fact that this is not the main thing and she does it for passion, I have a lot of sort of admiration for just stepping out of your usual comfort zone and simply taking that leap to make another film. And I really wonder what she's up to next. In fact, we have a video clip, because we couldn't interview her directly. We have a video clip from her about this, which we're going to play right now.
Hey guys, this is LaShaunte, the director and writer of Let Them Eat. I am super excited to be showing you guys this, and I am on the road right now, so I am staying busy. I hope you guys like it, and appreciate you guys so much.
Well, it was great to hear from her, and thank you very much, Luke, for coming down to discuss horror films with us. It's always a pleasure. I always love having these chats with you. It's always brilliant. And Diogo, thank you so much for putting the show together. How many horror films did you sift through before you got to the selection? Do you remember?
It was probably more than 20. You know, we got a lot of horror films sent to us, but I also looked for other ones online. So it was probably 30 or something.
Right. No, well, it couldn't have been that bad, right? I mean, to get to just watch films and pick your favorites, you know. That sounds like a good job to me. So thank you very much, guys, for helping put the show together. We have this was episode 2. We have episode 3 coming up next. And I just want to address you filmmakers out there. We have gotten so many submissions, over 100 submissions for Make It Short, and it was so much fun just selecting the ones for the last 2 episodes, and we have more episodes coming, obviously. But we did notice that there were a lot of men that submitted, but not very many women or other genders. So we would love to get more female filmmakers, more non-binary, transgender filmmakers, whatever you identify as. Please send us your films. We really want to talk to them, about them, and talk to you as well, and learn more about how you make your movies, and how you decide to get going, etc., etc. It's great. I mean, I love hanging with the boys, but we want to broaden the circle a little bit more and hear from more voices than that. So please send us your shorts. Go to centerframe.com/makeitshort. There you can submit the films, and please sign up to our newsletter and visit us on our social media to join the conversation. And if you know any filmmakers that should submit, please tag them on our social media to get them send this stuff over. We really, really want to see it, and we really want to talk about it. Thank you very much for joining us. Episode 3 will come soon.